capitalism on the way up, communism on the way down. These people made some incredibly bad decisions that were not rewarded with failure. We should never have bailed out any of these financial institutions. And I'm not doing this in a vacuum. There are a lot of free market economists that are on board here that would say that have said that no, we would not have suffered a collapse. But we didn't allow them to fail. We bailed them out, and now they're getting bonuses on top of this. Look, this is a rigged game. Federal Reserve Treasury prints money. The Federal Reserve gives it to the banks at 0% interest. They don't loan it to us. They buy treasuries in a closed loop, and they make profit off that, and we're paying for that profit. It's an inside game. This is a rigged game. So now I'm back to the fair tax, issuing pink slips to half of Washington lobbyists, because half of Washington lobbyists are there to get loopholes that both parties have their hands out and are selling.
Would you regulate Wall Street or not, Mr. Libertarian, Governor Libertarian?
Well, so oftentimes I don't want to avoid the question. It's just regulations I don't think are the issue. It's allowing the free market to actually work. And so much of free market criticism actually ends up to be crony capitalism. It's crony capitalism that exists. It's crony capitalism is what we have an issue with. And so when you hand down these regulations, what you end up doing is you end up protecting a class, banking, that we've allowed to be too big to fail.
But without regulation, haven't we seen that before? I mean, here a listener, Kevin, writes to us, as he is listening here, he says, how do libertarians justify their positions in total when we've already seen what they look like in actual practice? And we call that, Governor, period the Gilded Age.
Well, let me use Enron as an example.
Okay.
After Enron, they came up with the rule, and that was mark-to-market accounting. Well, oh my gosh, if there was ever a regulation that made sense, it's mark-to-market accounting that would prevent an Enron from ever occurring.
Show
again.
real value, yeah, okay.
Well, show real value. Mm-hmm. So arguably, mark-to-market accounting was a leading reason for why we had the 2008 collapse, because in a multi-trillion-dollar mortgage market, we had one $180,000 trade in the middle of December at 5 cents on the dollar on assets that were actually yielding 5 cents, but it sold at 5 cents. Well, the entire market had to mark itself at 5 cents, and that was the collapse. So you look at something as simple as mark-to-market accounting. How can we not implement this as a regulation? And arguably, that regulation is what precipitated the 2008, among other things, precipitated the 2008 collapse.
Gary Johnson is with us. He's running for the presidency of the United States as the Libertarian Party candidate. He's polling at about 4% nationally. Polling at CNN poll puts him at 7% in Colorado, in Nevada, two key swing states in the presidential election. Governor Johnson, stand by. Lots of callers for you. Benjamin in Springfield, Illinois. You're on the air with Gary Johnson.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Governor Johnson, I would love to vote for you, but I get nervous when I hear you talking about deregulation, and I'm afraid that you might have more faith in capitalism than I do to be able to protect some of the things that I think are important, like our environment and education. And when you start thinking about allowing the free market to just go on its own, seems like sometimes the things that are in the best interest of corporations aren't in the best interest of our society at large.
Well, first off, Benjamin, there's no disagreement there. I mean, government has a fundamental role to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations that would do us harm. And that's from a financial standpoint, that's from a physical standpoint, that's from a pollution standpoint. We don't want corporations polluting. And
so you would keep the EPA in there? You would keep the SEC hard at work?
Well, I think it comes under the guise of protecting us, if you will, and that it is a fundamental role of government. But in the notion that we have to cut government by 43%, we have to balance revenues with expenditures, or we find ourselves without a government, that's what I maintain. We need to cut all these things by 43%. We need to squeeze out the largesse and live within our means. I think we all recognize that you cannot continue unsustainable spending and debt.
Benjamin, what do you say to that as a response to your concern?
Well, I guess it all comes down to a matter of where you draw the line at, and how much do you think that the government should have an idea of where we should go and create policies to get us there, or should it simply allow kind of a social Darwinism or things to just progress at their own pace and stay out of it?
Can you really have it both ways, Governor Johnson? Can you cut to the depth that you want to cut and still have a government that's viable in protecting the kind of things that Benjamin's concerned about?
I do believe that. And let's not discount attorneys out there, okay? Attorneys play a valuable role. Attorneys do a much better job of holding individuals, groups, corporations liable for what they do.
Benjamin, thanks for your call. Daryl in Lake Worth, Florida. Daryl, you're on the air.
Hi, Governor. Hi, Tom. And Governor Johnson, I'm a big fan. I just have a question, and I want to keep your feet to the coals on this. I've read some kind of troubling quotes that your foreign policy, I know it's get the troops home now, but is it from everywhere? And I read some quotes that it's from everywhere except where they let us keep it, and that seems like a lot of places. I'm okay with humanitarian aid, but I want to know how many, I granted you're going to cut the military budget a lot, but I want to know how many troops, where do you want to keep them? Do you want to keep troops in Germany and Britain? Where do you want to keep troops, and from where do you want to bring them home?
Thanks, Daryl. Governor Johnson.
Well, so I'm going to be proposing a 43% reduction in military spending. And let me just start with the premise that we do need to provide ourselves with a strong national defense. I would just argue that defense is the operative word, not offense and not nation building. So how does a 43% reduction go down with regard to the military? Well, first of all, that takes military spending levels back to the year 2003, not quite the end of the world. Believing that the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar. But a 43% reduction in military spending, that is extricating ourselves from all of our military engagements.
Like where?
Well, that would be Afghanistan immediately. That would be Libya. That would be getting out of our embassies. Our military
getting out of our embassies in the Middle East, you've said in recent days, like pulling out of Egypt, out of Libya, out of Yemen.
Yes, it's not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of why make ourselves a target, and what are our vital American interests in the Middle East? I'm really curious. So back to the reduction. You got to reduce the military footprint by 43%. That would be the bases. That would be the military that we have
in Japan,
on
Europe,
duty in Japan, South Korea, Europe. It would be reducing nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500.
Could I just clarify on the basis? Does it mean cutting them by 43% or getting rid of them? Does it mean shrinking them or bringing them all home?
Well, I'll call it the military footprint. I don't want to speak. I'm going to promise that I'm going to submit that budget, and obviously that will be very specific, but I won't speak to specifics. But other than to reduce that footprint by 43%. So 43% of bases. Where do we cut? And not that doesn't end up to be a 70% reduction in bases. Military in uniform, on duty in South Korea, Japan.
What about Afghanistan, hot zones?
Well, let's bring the troops home from Afghanistan. And for all the issues that we're going to face getting out of Afghanistan tomorrow, I'm just going to suggest that if we get out of Afghanistan 20 years from now, we'll face the exact same issues 20 years from now. So let's just do it now.
You've said that you don't believe Iran is a military threat and that you would use presidential power to prevent Israel from attacking Iran and would not follow Israel, if I've got you right, or any other ally into a war it had initiated there. Explain, please.
Well, we bomb Iran. We're going to find ourselves in a 2-year bombing maintenance program of Iran. We're going to make ourselves another 100 million enemies to this country that we perhaps otherwise would not have. I maintain that we have 200 million enemies, hundreds of millions of enemies to this country that, but for our military interventions, might not exist today. So it's our military interventions that have us as the scourge, if you will, have us as the bully on the playground, as opposed to the notion that we would stand up against the bully.
And Israel as an ally that Benjamin Netanyahu would say feels itself very threatened, existentially threatened.
Well, we bomb Iran. The biggest demonstration in the world in support of the U.S. after 9/11 was in Iran. 1 million demonstrators showed up in Tehran and gave support to the United States. And these are the people that we're going to bomb. Look, our beef is with Ahmadinejad. The Ayatollahs have said they are not developing a nuclear weapon. So our issue is with Ahmadinejad, and here it is. We're going to bomb Iran. We're going to kill a lot of innocent people. Our own men and service women are going to end up dying. This is our military intervention. If I may, the root of all evil in this country are politicians that want to get elected or reelected, and they are going to pose to you that the scourge of the earth are drugs, that we need to rid ourselves of the terrorist threat, that the illegal immigrant is the worst thing that's ever happened. Elect me, re-elect me, and I will save you from all these ills. Well, it is in this context that we have our own men and service women coming back in body bags or coming back with their limbs blown off, and the tens of thousands of innocent people in the foreign countries that we've militarily intervened has also been a consequence.
Sarah in Boston. Sarah, thanks for calling. You're on with Gary Johnson.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Governor Johnson, I actually just have a question about something completely different. I was looking at your platform on education, and I noticed that you talk about going local and getting rid of the Department of Education. But I worry that without federal oversight, certain states might take the opportunity to get rid of programs like science classes or, have religion play a greater role in the school. And I wonder how you think that would play out.
Governor Johnson, thanks, Sarah.
Well, so the Department of Education, established in 1979 under Jimmy Carter, I would just argue that based on performance, is there anything to suggest that the Federal Department of Education has been value added since 1979? I'm going to argue no. So every single state gets 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends from the federal government. But understand, it's money that the state has sent to Washington in the first place. It kind of does a U-turn. They take a toll on it, and then they send it back. But they send it back with 16 cents worth of strings attached. So what everybody doesn't recognize is that it's really a negative. It costs money to take federal money. Just give education back to the states. 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and I think that's exactly what we will have.
What if those laboratories go back toward segregation? What if they go, as Sarah's concerned, against science? What does that mean for the country?
Well, you're believing that Washington has all the answers when it comes to this.
No, but it did push against segregation, and it has pushed under most presidents for science in the classroom.
Well, if you're talking about segregation, I mean, I think that is a constitutional issue where the federal government absolutely has a role. I'm not sure how segregation and education tie to one another. But,
well, they certainly did historically in quite vivid ways that we all remember if we were alive then. Governor Wallace standing in the doorway.
Well, Tom, you're talking about issues that occurred before there was a federal Department of Education.
Mm-hmm. And so let it go now and everything's okay. 50 laboratories of experimentation. I mean, it may be great. Sarah's worried about the places where it may fall the other way. We'll come back and look at that and much more. I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. We'll be right back. We're talking this hour with Libertarian Party presidential candidate Gary Johnson, former two-term governor of New Mexico, out to slash federal spending by almost half and bring the troops home from almost everywhere, as he describes it. Joins us today from Durham, New Hampshire. He is on the ballot in 47 states, 3 more where he's still fighting, swing states where he may be a real factor. Gary Johnson, lots of response online here. Nicholas says, voting for Gary Johnson is like recycling. If everyone did it, the world would be a better place. Well, we'll see how many do. But then Casey writes, says to me, I guess, could you ask him to stop making libertarianism seem like it's just about legalizing marijuana and letting homosexuals marry, when in reality, she writes, he mostly just wants to destroy unions and get rid of things like Head Start and NPR, she adds. Of course, Mitt Romney would, too. What do you say to that characterization?
Well, look, I am just in the camp